Hi, Raj from Refined here, and in this video I'll take you through how you can build a Confluence intranet with Refined. I'll showcase some key features that you can make use of especially for this use case, and I'll demo this on Refined for Cloud, but the functionality exists and works the same way, even if you're using Refined for Confluence on data center or on server. So here is what the end result will look like for our intranet site, and I'll show you how to build this out from scratch. So let's get going. So the first thing to think about when building your intranet is to prepare the content and the content strategy. This is done in native Confluence. To start off with, it's important to set some standards on how content on the Confluence pages is created and formatted in order to make it uniform. The content creators should be able to use this as a resource when creating content in order to avoid different pages looking vastly different from each other, so to have some sort of standardization on the content of the intranet. My example here has a document that has some do's and don'ts for the content creators to follow as they create their content. It's also important to be able to set the purpose for spaces and to group together relevant pages under these spaces if that hasn't been done already. Confluence allows you to use a hierarchy of spaces and within these parent and child pages to ensure that relevant content is grouped together in the right spaces and also to the right user groups. So you can use permissions both on the space level and on page level in order to ensure that the relevant user groups have content that's relevant and necessary for them to have. Permissions set on Confluence spaces and pages here, this is always respected in Refined. So if a user does not have access to see a certain page in default Confluence, they will not see that in Refined either. Once the content of the spaces is in order, the next thing to think about is how the spaces relate to each other and how you can group them. This will be useful when building the structure of your intranet in Refined. So think about how the spaces could relate to each other and how they would sit in the structure of your intranet. And feel free to sketch this out if necessary. You can document this somewhere too, like in my example here, in order to clarify the purpose of the intranet spaces and also how and where new spaces can be added as your organization grows. In my example here, I'm going to divide the intranet into 4 main categories: teams, projects, resources, and HR. And on this document, I have a bit of a guideline or an explanation on what each of these categories entails and what sort of spaces should go into each of these. I've also got some information about the groups that should have the view permissions for intranet spaces and how to deal with the spaces themselves. So on that note, Confluence also allows you, if I open this up, to assign a space category to the different spaces. These are useful as labels to get an overview of the spaces. So you can label, for example, team spaces with teams. In my example, what I've done is all the spaces that should be on the intranet, I have labeled with intranet. And then some of these have additional labels, such as teams or software project or resources, depending on what sort of category they would sit in. It's important to note that even though these space categories don't show up in the Refined side, they're incredibly useful to help you organize your spaces here in the default Confluence view, especially if you're running multiple sites. So you'll be able to use these to prepare the spaces for different sites and use cases on the Refined side. A final preparation item is to analyze the content of the spaces for the intranet and then extract navigation items. What needs to be easily accessible? What is relevant for all users to have on the landing pages, for example? What's relevant to have on team spaces landing pages? The navigational items could be pages with relevant information. It could be whole spaces that intranet users need to access quickly. It could be news and updates and more. Identifying these items will be crucial in building out both the structure of the intranet as well as the different landing pages on the intranet. The second step in building an intranet with Refined is to actually build the structure of the intranet. So this refers to the setup and hierarchy of the navigational menu items and where the spaces from Confluence will sit in this hierarchy. This will build on the preparatory step that we've done before, where we now take the foundation we laid in Confluence and use that to build out the intranet structure on a refined site, like this one. Using Refined, you can create sites with complex hierarchies built using refined pages and menu folders, and nesting content from Confluence under these, so that's the spaces. If you're looking for a guide on how to get started with building your sites, we've got a previous video that covers this, and we'll link that in the description to this one. Here is my site, so my intranet site, and this is what I have in the site builder. A good tip on how to approach the grouping of spaces and the hierarchical structure, as referenced in my content structure document before, is to think about the relationships between spaces and how they will be used. So in my example here, I have a parent item for teams, and then one for projects, one for resources, and then I also have an HR item and a standalone news item. And if we go back up under the teams item, I have a child item for product and some spaces under that, and one for IT and some content under that as well. And then we've got the projects item. This houses spaces which are used for documenting and collaborating on ongoing projects. Resources contains the company strategies, processes, goals, and so on. And then we've got HR that contains information useful for employees, the handbook, office information, and things like that. And this is one example of how a hierarchy can be built using the site builder in Refined. This is very flexible depending on the needs of your organization. You might want to have a parent item for each geographical location, for example, if you have multiple geographical locations, or something else entirely. As mentioned, it's always useful to sketch this out prior to starting with a site build. This will make the work easier and you'll have a clearer picture of what the final result would ideally be. And of course, the items that you add here in the site builder, if I open up the site itself, these items directly build what is in the top navigation. So if I have a Teams parent item, 2 child items under that, and some spaces under those, then that's exactly what I get in the nav menu rather. A Teams parent item, 2 child items, and then some spaces under that. The third step we'll talk about is applying the company theme and brand to the intranet. The intranet should ideally reflect the company culture and identity. The most obvious way of achieving this is through the look and feel of the intranet, like in my example here. It's extremely easy to use Refined's in-product theme editor to create themes that match the company branding. We've got a previous video for this that shows you how to create a theme from scratch, and we'll link that in the description here. You can create as many themes as you like, and then you can apply these themes on your different sites. So if I go to my site here and my intranet, I can see the theme that's been added here, and I can click on this if I want to change it to another theme. You can also choose to create variations on the same theme. For example, the default behavior in Refined is that all the child items on your site will inherit the theme on the main home, but you can create, for example, a variation of the main theme and apply that for team spaces, for example, just to have them looking a little bit different but still have the same style as the parent items. So if we go into the configuration of the site, there's some other aspects here as well that allow you to add the company brand to the intranet. You can of course add your logo here, and you can also add a favicon. I haven't done that yet, but you can upload it here as well. Another good tip here is to choose a memorable name for your intranet. I've called mine the hub. By default, when you create a site in Refined, you can choose the subdomain, and then you get a .refine.site domain after that. So I've got tactivehub.refine.site, but you can take this one step further as well and add a custom domain to your site. So I could, if I owned tactiv.com, for example, then I can call this site hub.tactiv.com. So it becomes a very memorable domain that's easy for your employees to remember. The fourth step is to lay out your landing pages. The theme aside, what really makes your intranet come to life are the landing pages that the users will find themselves on while browsing the intranet. These are not the Confluence pages, mind you, but the web pages or landing pages on the Refined site. that are editable and customizable using different modules. You can put whatever you want on these pages using Refine's layout editor, whether it's navigation links to help users find pages or spaces in that section of your site, or news modules that show, for example, blog posts, or modules that show recent activity in a space or a page tree, whatever your users would find most useful. In my intranet example here, I'll show you two different landing pages and the thoughts behind the module choices on each of these. Firstly, we have this, which is the main site home. Think about what's useful for your end users to see here, since this will be the first page that they view when landing on the intranet. Do you remember the key navigational items that we analyzed our Confluence content for and extracted in step 1? Using the navigation modules here on our site home, we can easily provide our end users with quick links to some of this content. A useful tip is combining static and dynamic content on your landing page. Static content is, for example, links that will lead to specific pages but don't change that often. Dynamic would include things like news feeds, similar to what we have here, as well as Confluence page streams and so on. So in this example here, we've got quite a prominent quick links section right in the middle. These are added in a links list module, and they're linked to Confluence pages that the end users of our intranet will likely need to access quickly. And then to the right of that, we've got two navigation modules that allow the user quick access to HR and IT respectively. Below this, we have a pages module that shows recently updated content from Confluence. It's a card style insight into what their colleagues have been most recently working on. And then here to the left, we have a news module, which provides communication possibilities for what's new at the company and useful for the user to know. The dynamic modules, such as the news module that pull Confluence content, they have some filtering options. For example, on this module, if I go into edit mode, then we've used a filter, company updates, in order to filter down on blog posts that are relevant for just this topic. This keeps this news stream limited to just those posts, so you can use this to control what sort of blog posts are visible on your landing page. This is one way that you can display news to your end users on the intranet. Another option is to build a dedicated landing page just for news. And I have actually added a refined page for this. And this is what it looks like. So this is made up of a simple navigation highlight module right at the top, just inviting the user in and letting them know where they are. And then we have 4 different news feeds. These are all picking up blogs from Confluence. 2 of them right at the top are showing company updates and life at active, so a more fun and what's happening sort of blog feed. And these are set to slideshow mode. And then below this, we have a product updates blog feed. And we also have a team updates blog feed. And as mentioned before, these are simply done using different filters on the blog posts. One has company updates, one has life of active, product updates, and team updates respectively. Next, we'll take a look at one more example of a landing page, and now we'll look at a space landing page. So this is a team space home, and some thoughts on how we've built this out in this example. The key consideration here is to think about the purpose of these spaces and what you want to show to users that land on this space home. Is the purpose to introduce the teams and showcase what they're working on to users from other teams? Or is it meant to be a space where that particular team collaborates on work and stores their content? Or is it both? My example here is a bit of a combination of both. So we've got a page tree module on the left side. This allows for navigation of the space content. This is useful for both members of this team and other teams to browse through what is in this space. To the right-hand side, we're using an HTML module to display some information about the team members and present them to other teams. So I've done this with the HTML module, which is a bit of a wildcard. Essentially, you can use it to embed any sort of custom code on a refined landing page, so you can embed widgets or anything else. I've used it just to display images and some text, but you can use it for like Twitter feeds, for LinkedIn profiles, much more. Another simpler option for displaying this sort of information, team member information, is by using a navigation module with an image, text, and link, for example. And then finally, at the bottom of this team space home, we have a pages module, which shows some work in progress pages. So this provides some visibility on what's most recently been worked on in this space by this team. And finally, at the bottom, we've added a couple of navigation modules that give some quick access to important pages in the space. This might be useful for external teams, for example, who aren't familiar with the space structure. A useful tip for landing pages like this is to standardize the landing page for the different team spaces. And you can easily do this in Refined by using layout exports and imports. So if you go in and edit a layout that you've already created and are happy with, there is the option to export that version of the layout. I will go ahead and do that. And then to make it easy for your space admins to find and use this space layout export, you can add it to a Confluence page, for example. So I will go ahead and do that. So if I go into my content structure page, I've already created one for templates and resources. If I edit this, then I can upload the exported layout here and simply publish this. And then on my Confluence page, in the refined context, I have a link to that layout, and I can simply download this and add it to any other landing page as needed. One thing that you need to be wary of is to ensure that the links that you've created on your layout are updated when you import it to a new space. A good rule of thumb is to probably, when you're creating the layout that will be used as a template, add in some blank spaces where the links would be. So if you add, for example, the navigation modules, you don't need to add the links immediately, but you can leave these blank, and then every time you import it on a space home, the links can then be added relevant to that space home. So one final useful feature that I'll touch on is the section permissions on a landing page. And you can use this to create landing pages with sections that are locked off for different user groups. So for example, on the main site home, I can go ahead and add a section right at the bottom here. And within this section, just add a simple navigation and say this is templates for space homes, for example. And then I can add a link to the page that has the resources. So what I'm doing here is adding a relative link that doesn't include the domain itself. The useful thing with doing this is if I choose to add a custom domain to this site later on, then this link will not break. It will just take the domain /space/space key and so on. And if I add that in, I can then add a permission in here. And let's say that I want my content creators to see this. My current logged in user is not a content creator. They're an admin. So if I publish this layout, then I do not see that section, but if I was in the content creator group, I would see it. So that's quite useful to be able to edit the sections and expose relevant content to relevant user groups as needed. As you've seen, however, if you are an admin, then in edit mode, you will be able to see all the sections, including those that have permissions on them. All right, now that we've taken a look at how to lay out the landing pages on your intranet, I will now take this a step further with step 5, personalizing the intranet experience for the end user. One of the goals with an intranet is adoption, making sure that the intranet is being visited and used by the employees in the way that it was intended to be used. A key step in realizing this is personalizing the intranet experience for the logged in user. And I'll show you a couple of ways to do this. The first is to use text variables within modules. These can be used for various purposes. They can be used to provide context on where the user is on the site, to showing space names and keys, but we want to make use of these for personalization. So I will modify this welcome message using a text variable to make it a bit more personalized. We've also got some information here in the module itself on how you can use text variables. This links out to our documentation and you can read more about it. But what I'm going to do here is add a user first name variable, so I get a personalized welcome message. And if I publish this, then now it says, welcome to the hub, Raj. And this, of course, if I was logged in with someone else, Florence, for example, it would say, welcome to the hub, Florence. Another way to personalize the intranet experience is to use filters on the dynamic modules. So those modules that show dynamic content from Confluence, and tailor these to the logged in user's needs. If we go ahead and edit this layout again, I'm going to use one of these in order to show me a list of my work. So what I've most recently worked on, so I can get back to that quickly. And we want to make this using the activity stream. We're going to rename this to my work. And what we'll do here is we want each logged in user to be able to see what they have most recently worked on. So we'll use the contributor field and we'll add in current user. These are the simple filters. There's also an advanced mode where you can use CQL, Confluence Query Language, and write quite complex SQL queries in order to narrow this down to whatever you like, basically. In this example, I'm going to use a simple one, and this is CQL as well, the current user parameter, and we've called it my work. So we go ahead and save this. And then if we publish the layout and scroll further down, now we've got a my work module using the activity stream that shows me what I, Raj, have most recently worked on. If another user logs into this site, this will then show them what they have most recently worked on instead. Finally, another cool personalization feature which comes with Refined by default, you don't need to do anything to set this up, is the recently viewed feature in the global search. So it's the search icon in the top right hand corner. And if I click this to pop the global search, then I can see what I've most recently viewed in the list here. And this is really neat in that I can easily get back to and continue with whatever I was previously viewing or working on the intranet without needing to look for it all over again. Finally, we'll take a quick look at some bonus features that you can use to further enhance your intranet using Refined. When building out and maintaining the intranet, it's often the case that the Confluence admin themselves aren't necessarily the people in charge of designing and structuring and creating the content on the intranet. With this in mind, Refined has an admin level permission that can be delegated to any licensed Confluence user, regardless of their Confluence admin permissions. And this is the Refined administrator permission. This permission level allows the user to manage all aspects of the Refined app. They can create themes, manipulate the site builder hierarchy, as well as edit all the layouts or landing pages. This is extremely useful on an intranet use case, since the Confluence admin can delegate Refined administration permissions to, for example, the design team, who can work on the theming and the layouts and the visual aspects, as well as the content strategy team, who can build out the structure in the site builder and contribute to building the navigational aspects on the landing pages as well. Another interesting integration that could prove useful when building an intranet with Refined is to include JSM help disks on the intranet. This is achieved by using both Refined for Confluence Cloud and Refined for Jira Cloud together. You can simply go into your site builder and you can add a JSM project into your site. and then you can surface content from that project on your intranet. You can choose to either have the project as a part of the navigation menu or hide it from the navigation menu, depending on your needs. Either way, you will be able to use content from that service desk, so the requests and the request types, on your intranet site. The main advantage of having both integrations is that you can easily create landing pages with a combination of JSM and Confluence modules, and I'll show you an example of this here. So this is an HR example, and on this landing page I have some Confluence pages in a Pages module, as well as some request types which are coming from the service desk itself. So as an end user, I come to this landing page and I have the option to either read up on some information that I'm looking for, or I can go ahead and directly create a request about the same, all on the same context without needing to go back and forth. So there you have it, a step-by-step guide on how you can build an intranet based on Confluence using Refined. I hope this video has been useful for you. Please feel free to reach out to us at any time via our help center, support.refined.com, should you have any questions for us. You can also read more on our apps over at our documentation site, docs.refined.com.